Jordan. All right, I have some A&W root beer here, which we are going to utilize in a minute. It's a delight to be here. I just came back from California. I was at Chapman University, where I am teaching a group of students on financial economics. So these are budding investors, future Warren Buffetts, all of them interested in cryptocurrencies and artificial intelligence and self-driving cars to give them more time to text while you're driving. So it's a pleasure to be here and to speak to you on a subject that I think you'll find of interest, and that is the A&W principle, how to convert students from socialism to free markets in one simple lesson. And to introduce that, I give a talk called Who's Winning the War of Ideas, and especially Who's Winning the War of Ideas on Campus. And of course, the socialists are winning the war on campus. In fact, a recent survey showed that students felt that socialism had offered a better opportunity than capitalism, a majority of students. And Bernie Sanders, sorry to confuse the two. It's easy to confuse the two because they're both selling false promises. Senator Bernie Sanders is very popular on campus and almost convinced Democrats that he should be their candidate. And he offers himself as a socialist with a small s, because it's very hard to find someone who is a true, devoted leader to socialism, because socialism means nationalization of all industries. And can anyone imagine government trying to run an airline, a hotel, a coal mining factory? But the fact is, government has tried to operate these companies and industries, and one of their biggest arguments, and it sounds very convincing, is that, well, if you're not a for-profit company, you can save a lot of money but not having to pay a profit. So your price can be based on cost, cover your cost, but there's no need to earn a profit. So you can lower your costs of production and your prices to the consumer because you're not a for-profit, because all companies that operate on a for-profit basis operate on a cost-plus system. What is your cost? And you add on an additional expense to make your profit, and that's what you charge consumers. Ergo, the way to reduce costs to consumers is to nationalize industry after industry. And yet it failed miserably. And why did it fail miserably? Well, you need an economist who understands free market economics to explain that to students. And most academics have never made a payroll, have never had to hire and fire people. This is why I've always argued that the best professors should be taken from the real world and have them teach economics to you as students rather than those who have spent their entire life learning economics staring into a textbook. And the answer is really very simple if you've ever run a business. It's because of the profit motive. It's because of the profit motive that costs are lowered. So even when you have cost plus pricing, the prices to consumers tend to decline because costs are always being cut due to competition and every effort to eliminate waste and unnecessary expenses. So, who's winning the war of ideas? Well, Adam Smith represents free market capitalism. He wrote a fantastic book called The Wealth of Nations that was published. It was a declaration of economic independence. So what year was that? What year was the Declaration of Political Independence? Pardon? 1776. You all knew that, right? Especially my straight-A students here on the front row. He's even got you have one of my books, that's right. How many of you have a copy of my book? Oh, fantastic. How many have read it? Yeah, it doesn't take long. It's full of interesting little quotes. So, Adam Smith wrote the Declaration of Economic Independence, making the case for a system of natural liberty, which he called the invisible hand. In this totem pole of economics, I put him at the top with wings flying. Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations. Below him is Keynes, and low man on the totem pole is Karl Marx. Now, Karl Marx is all the rage on campuses. They may not call it Marxism, but it is Marxism, and you will encounter it, not just in economics, but in sociology, literary theory, anthropology, and political science. Marxism is still very much alive on college campuses. So I have a silver dollar here that was minted in 1883. And I took it to a friend of mine. His name was Professor Eric Schutz at Rollins College, who is a devout Marxist. When you walk into his room, you will see posters of Che Guevara, Karl Marx, Stalin, not so much. But still, there are heroes that he has on the walls. So we were friends, colleagues at Rollins College. So I walked into his office and I said, Eric, I want to give you this coin, 1883 coin, if you can name the economist who died in the year this coin was minted. He said, that's easy, Karl Marx. And I said, that's right, don't ever forget it. He's dead. But he had a good answer, a good response. He says, yes, Karl Marx is dead, but I'm alive and I'm teaching your students. Good answer. And that's sadly the case. But to me, Karl Marx is low man on the totem pole. I've written a book called The Making of Modern Economics. It's a textbook that's quite popular on campuses. And you come to the Marx chapter, and it's called Marx Madness, Plunges Economics into a New Dark Age. So you kind of know where I stand on Karl Marx. It's translated into Chinese. And I asked the Chinese translator, I said, well, what's the chapter title? What does it say? And he said, The Political Economy of Karl Marx. They were afraid to put my title, Marx Madness, which they wouldn't understand the play on words anyway, with the NCAA basketball tournament, March Madness. But then they said everything else is exactly what I said, where I talked about how Marx's predictions have failed, his theory has failed. He has made some positive contributions, but he attracts, his philosophy of Marxism attracts anyone who's been disfellowshipped or disenfranchised by capitalism. Perhaps someone who's lost their job, who is struggling, who might find Marxism appealing. And then Keynes is in the middle. He represents big government, not totalitarian, not nationalizing all the industries, but aggregate demand and supply in a welfare state that stabilizes the economy. So I put him in the middle, because Keynes was actually an introduction that was an alternative to Marxism that was all the rage in the 1930s. So in a sense, he saved capitalism from a worse fate. So anyway, there's a Florida sculptor, an artist that for a nice price was willing to create this beautiful totem pole, and I have that up in my home in New York. But my book, The Making of Modern Economics, has a smaller version called The Big Three in Economics, and it was just translated into Arabic. So I'm quite excited about a book of this nature, which is anti-Marx, anti-Keynes, and pro-Adam Smith, getting in the hands of perhaps thousands of students like you in the Arab world. But you can tell that the person who designed the cover had not read the book, because you can see who's on top. It's Karl Marx. And he's not dead in the Middle East. And this is one of the problems what we face in our war against Islamic terrorism or fundamentalism or Marxism, if you will. And it's not representative of the vast majority of Muslim people. But nevertheless, it needs to be taught in the schools in the Middle East. So I'm delighted that my book, it's kind of a Trojan horse, if you will, who is being presented as, oh, here's this wonderful book on the Big Three in economics, and it obviously must be quite favorable because one of the Big Three is our hero, Karl Marx. So it'll be interesting to see what the response is on that. So then we come to Senator Bernie Sanders, who makes a couple of statements which sound very appealing. Before I say this, I will tell you that the most appealing terminology that you will hear among Marxists and socialists is this. In fact, this came from Karl Marx himself. From each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. Have you ever heard that before? Doesn't that sound appealing? From each according to his ability, to each according to his needs, is the foundation of what socialists truly believe. And Bernie Sanders is an example of that. He would find that very appealing. In fact, if you said this to your fellow students, and many of them would say, oh, yes, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. This sounds like a wonderful system of organization. But is it? So I always ask my students to, after they've taken my course in economics, I give them this quote. And I say, put your cap on, your economics cap on, and criticize, analyze this statement. Is there anything wrong with this statement? And some students struggle with it because it sounds so appealing. From each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. But then I ask the critical question. What happens if you earn more money beyond your needs? What happens to that money? If you earn, say the average standard of living, each person is paid $50,000 a year to satisfy your needs. How many of you students could live on $50,000 a year? Most of you. Some of you have very expensive habits. You've invested in Bitcoin or what have you, and it collapsed. So, but $50,000, that's a reasonable amount of income to pay for your expenses, right? Even here in Florida. Even as a student, you could survive on that. So suppose you made $60,000. You get to keep the additional 10? Suppose you made $100,000. Do you get to keep the extra $50,000? You don't. Because you're paid only to your needs. Your needs are $50,000. So anything above that is taxed away. So if you put your economics cap on, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs, is in essence a 100% marginal tax rate above the need level. And this is why socialist, communitarian types of economies have not survived, because they're up against a 100% marginal tax rate on anything that is above average. You earn $50,000, you get to keep it. You earn anything more than that, it's all confiscated. So do you earn any more than $50,000 a year? You might, but you're going to have a very open mind and say, this I do for the community. And yes, there are people willing to do that. But year after year, generation after generation, in Israel they had this system called the kibbutz. And it was very successful for several generations. Now the young people, they're really struggling to keep the young people. Why? Because they have incentives. They want to do something with their lives, and they don't want to be stuck with the average income level. Economics is about incentives. If you want to put one word on what is economics all about, incentives is a way of doing it. So, we have questions. We have these statements that sound really good. And education should be available to all, regardless of anyone's station. Now, of course, he's referring, especially, he's adding on not just grade school, not just high school, but college education as well. He believes that college education should be free, as it is in most of Europe, as it used to be in California. If you were a California student, you didn't pay anything for a California school. Now they start charging tuition. You wonder why. Or health care must be recognized as a right and not a privilege. And by that he means single-payer system, which means the taxpayer pays so that you yourself go in for a medical expenditure, no matter how expensive, and it is free. Now you can see why these ideas of college tuition for free and medical expenses for free sounds very appealing. I dare say, by a show of hands, how many of you are in favor of free college instead of how much do you pay for your college education at your local school? Way too much. You say, wouldn't it be great? And some of you probably have student loans. We're going to forgive all the student loans. All in favor? Oh, see, I've got you now. Here. I think I should run for office. Get rid of these student loans. Free tuition for everybody. Free medical expenses for everyone. And let's not stop there. Surely food is so essential for living. Food stamps for everyone. All in favor? See, yeah, I got you going here. Vote for Mark Skousen. If you can't pronounce the name, it's all right. Can't spell the name, that's okay. This guy's very appealing. All right, so now we're going to introduce the principles, very powerful principle called the A&W principle. A&W principle. Visual aid. A&W principle. So A is for accountability, also known as the benefit principle in economics. The A stands for accountability, which means the user pays. Why is that important? The user pays. How many of you pay for your own part or all of your college education? Show of hands. So do you know how much you paid? You know what it is? All for those who aren't paying for your college education, do you know what the price is for your education? No, you don't, because you didn't pay for it. And believe me, folks, if you don't pay for something, you don't really look at the price. That is the danger. Studies have shown that students who pay for part or all of their education choose their major sooner, get better grades, and graduate faster. Why? Pocketbook issue. Pocketbook issue. So then we switch to welfare. The other side. The A, accountability, the user pays. Welfare. The welfare means you help those who only need help. Sounds reasonable, makes perfect sense. Those of us who are from the Judeo-Christian code, we've been taught all our lives to be charitable, to help those who are in need of help. But there's another side to this coin. The other side of the coin is you do not help people who don't need help, because then if you help people who don't need help, you destroy their initiative. You impinge upon A, the accountability, if you help people who don't need help. So there's always a bit of a tension. If W is too generous, it affects A. You got to have the right balance to make this delicious to the taste. There's an ideal balance between A and W, isn't there? Because if you're too generous in welfare and you're helping everybody, suppose you're a minister and you're giving you have a group. This is my congregation right here. Fantastic congregation. We've adopted the welfare principle. We help those but we only help those who need help. We don't help all of you. If you need help, come and meet with me. If you have short-term problems, needs, I'll help you out. We're going to pass the plate to pay for it. Imagine, on the other hand, the next week, the minister says, I've decided to become a very liberal minister, and if anyone in this congregation, rich or poor, healthy or unhealthy, if you have needs, come to me and I will fulfill them. So now, it's fantastic. In fact, the next week, every seat is taken because everyone knows that the welfare system is so generous that it's available to everyone. But the minister says, we have a problem now. For some reason, we've run out of money. So when we pass the plate, can you please be more generous? And that's what's really happened with our welfare system. When we pay for everybody's Social Security, when we pay for everybody's medical expenses and Medicare, and when I met Warren Buffett, I said, so you have a Social Security? You're on Social Security? Yes. You're on Medicare? Yes. Should the American taxpayer, through the Social Security and welfare system, pay for your retirement and your medical expenses? He says, of course not. It's a defective system. And so, meanwhile, you have food stamp program, which qualifies for the A&W principle, the welfare principle, because not everyone is on food stamps. You have to have a means test, right? Now, if I was speaking out to this investment audience outside here, and I said, by a show of hands, how many of you are on Social Security and how many are in Medicare, how many hands would go up? Almost every hand, right? Because everybody's 65 or older. And I've done this before. I said, show of hands, how many on Social Security and Medicare? And all the hands go up. I said, keep your hands up. Now, how many of you are on food stamps? Whew. Every hand goes down. I said, why? They don't qualify. No means test. And it's a welfare program. I wouldn't take it even if it was offered me. Well, the answer is, it's because there's a means test. And if there wasn't a means test, there'd be food stamps and every hand would be going up. That's the danger. And so there's no question why we have an unfunded liability of trillions of dollars in Social Security and Medicare, because it violates the welfare principle. But food stamps, Medicaid, although it's gotten out of hand, at 1.47 million Americans on food stamps, so we were too generous with the W principle at one point, and it's finally going back down. So, yes, ma'am. Yes. Oh, Q&A. Well, let's take some Q&A. So I talk about a means test here as just examples of kind of things that you could do. Let's open it up to questions. Do you have any questions, or has it been pretty straightforward? Now, what's the main objection that wealthy people have to a means test for Social Security and Medicare? They don't need it, but they insist on getting it. Why? They already paid into it. So the accountability is there. They're accountable. They paid in for it. They should be getting it. But it's too generous because everybody's getting it. And the 401k plans, and so an alternative to Social Security, what is known as a defined contribution plan, is one of those things that works really well because you don't have the unfunded liability problem. But then it's on your ability to invest your money to decide whether it's a good program or not. So my point is this: there are solutions to the unfunded liability problem that we're facing now. And all of our problems, government needs to operate under the A&W principle. That's my main message to you today. Any other questions? Yes?
So how do you suggest convincing or discussing these topics with people who disagree with your message? Who would suggest that socialism is the answer?
Right. So for those who are socialists, who find socialism appealing, you need to tell them the 100% marginal tax effect when they fall into the temptation toward from each according to his ability to each according to his needs. And you need to teach them the A&W principle. If you have a program, a club, and you're advertising, put out some free A&W and have them come by and drink the A&W, and then you can tell them about it as just an example of how a good system works. And see what's really appealing about this? It appeals to both Republicans and Democrats. Republicans are naturally inclined toward the A principle. The Democrats say the welfare principle is what we think is really important. You can put them both together. We're too divisive in our country. This is a concept that can bring people together. Yes?
What is your objection to universal health care in regards to the fact that only those who need it at the time use it when everyone pays for the system?
I hope everybody heard her question. So universal health care system, which is one where you don't have to pay, so your marginal cost, other than the time it takes to go and visit a doctor, you have no payment. It's taken care of by the taxpayer. A drawing of the demand curve is really valuable here. The demand curve will show you as you lower the price of a product, the demand increases. And you may say, well, you're either sick or you aren't sick. That's not the case. You have varying degrees of sickness. And you have varying pricing. For example, I'll use a personal example. My mother-in-law, 85 years of age, fell and hurt herself. Went to the doctor. The doctor said, I think you'll be fine. She said, I want an MRI. The doctor said, you don't need an MRI. I want an MRI. And why did she say that? Because it's free. But the taxpayer pays $2,000 for that MRI. So these are examples of real examples. And so, but you can't, your answers always have to provide an alternative. So the alternative is the health savings accounts. Health savings accounts provide the incentives for accountability, the A principle, while it also provides the welfare principle. And I don't have time to go into the health savings accounts, but John Mackey of Whole Foods and others have developed this very well. And he is working, by the way, with Amazon and with Warren Buffett and Google to develop this health investment program that'll be really good. Well, I've run out of time, but I thank you all very much and hope you enjoyed it.